All right, welcome to chapter 19. We're going to start the circulatory system. Get right to it, okay? We're focusing on the heart today. But a couple things just about the circulatory system in general before we jump into the heart. The main function of the circulatory system is to transport things. It's kind of a highway system throughout your body. Your blood is what carries those substances, but it's important to understand that the blood vessels and the highway system is a lot more than kind of what we typically see in books and posters. That just shows the major blood vessels, okay? This picture here is a better representation. That's actually from a real body. Let me get my pen. And you can still see the shapes of like the arms and these are the lungs. Let me get a different color here. Okay, you can see a lung right there. Okay, so you've got these little tiny capillaries that feed all of your tissue with blood. Okay, and the reason is that it carries everything. So oxygen, glucose, it takes the needed things to your system, but it also brings the waste away. Your immune system uses the circulatory system to transport its disease fighters. So incredibly important, but incredibly vast as well. From the tips of your fingers to your major organs, okay? These blood vessels, this system goes all throughout, okay? So now let's talk about the heart. The first thing that you should notice is the position of the heart. And it might be a little misleading. You know, we put our hand on our heart when we do the pledge, but your heart is really right in the middle, okay? You can kind of see it right here, right smack dab in the middle. It does tip down to the left a little bit. The bottom tip of it goes down to the left, and so I think that's why we use the left side. But it really is center in your chest. And if you make a fist, your heart is about as big as your fist, okay? So you can kind of think of it right there. Your heart has 4 chambers to it. We've talked about that when we talked about mammals. There's 2 up on the top, the atria, okay? Those would be like these guys up here. They receive blood. And then your heart is a pump, but the ventricles, the 2 ventricles on the bottom, are the ones that actually do the pumping, okay? This is where we find the cardiac muscle. Your entire heart is made of a special kind of muscle. And it beats on its own. There's an internal pacemaker. So there's a part of the heart, it's called the SA node. You don't need to worry about that. It sends electrical impulses to the heart muscle itself. Your brain controls the heart rates, but the electrical activity comes from the heart itself. When I was in college, I actually dissected frogs, but this is kind of weird. Hopefully this doesn't disturb you too much. I'm sorry, Olivia. We would sever the brainstem of the frog. So the frog could not feel anything, but the frog was still living. Okay, the heart was still beating, and we would administer different drugs to the heart to see the result. But at the very end, we actually took the little heart out, and the heart beat in my hand by itself on its own, because the heart has its own electrical impulse inside of it, okay? And that's the same thing with human hearts. I don't think you could take a human heart out and keep it beating. I wouldn't recommend it. Anyway, inside of the heart are valves that prevent blood from getting into different valves that you don't want it to get into. I'll show you those. I'm going to dissect the heart and show you guys that. There's some pictures of those in your book. And then your heart works on this 2-loop system. Okay, I'm gonna get back to that 2-loop system. One other thing that I want to point out that's really interesting is in babies, before a baby's born, okay, there's this little hole in between the 2 top atria there, because in an unborn baby, a baby that hasn't been born yet, the blood does not need to go to the lungs at all. Okay, and the oxygen is coming from the mother's blood through the placenta, and so these ventricles aren't needed, because the blood doesn't have to get pumped. This ventricle isn't needed. This would be the one that would send it to the lungs. Okay, so that one skipped. So the blood comes in to the right atria, skips, goes to the left atria, left ventricle, and gets pumped to the body. Okay. Once the baby's born, that hole closes up, and then the blood flows through as normal. That's our next slide. Let's look at the normal flow of blood through a heart, all right? Okay, should be a little easier for you to see. And actually, if you look at page 597 in your books, okay, 597, you can kind of follow along, and there's a good diagram there. You absolutely are going to need to know the pathway of blood through the heart. You will be required to know that. I usually start in the right atrium, which is this right here. But understand, see how it starts with the right atrium and it ends with the right atrium? This is a continual cycle, okay? You can join this at any point and kind of keep going through the same order, okay? But I typically start in the right atrium. Blue, by the way, is deoxygenated blood. Red is oxygenated blood, okay? So let's start at the right atrium. It receives blood, receives deoxygenated blood from the body, goes down into the right ventricle, which is a pump. It pumps the blood to the lungs. To get to the lungs, it goes out these pulmonary arteries, okay? Goes to the lungs, picks up oxygen. Now that oxygenated blood needs to come back into the heart, okay? It comes in through these pulmonary veins. It's received by the left atrium, goes down into the left ventricle, because that's the pump. The left ventricle then pumps the blood out to the body. The blood leaves through the aorta, top and bottom. It's the biggest blood vessel in your body. And then from there, it's a major artery, but then that branches down into smaller arteries. Then those arteries eventually become little tiny capillaries, which is where all the dropping off and picking up of stuff takes place. And we'll talk more about that in the next lesson. Then it needs to come back. So we go to veins, okay, larger and larger and larger veins, until finally we get to the vena cava, which is the largest vein in the body. And that brings that deoxygenated blood back to the heart, where we start again in the right atrium, okay? Again, page 597 has a really good diagram of this, and I am going to give you guys an assignment on drawing the heart, okay? So stay tuned for that. Back to that two-loop system. The heart has 4 chambers, okay? The right side is in charge of one loop, and the left side is in charge of another loop, okay? And it has to do with the deoxygenated and the oxygenated and whatnot, okay? This diagram is really a simplified version of it. The 2 loops we talk about are the pulmonary loop, okay? That's your lungs. And that comes from the right side, okay? So we've got our right atrium right there, and our right ventricle right there. Right atrium receives, right deoxygenated blood. Right ventricle then pumps it to the lungs where it gets the oxygen, okay? And then it has to come back, okay? So we go whoop, there's one loop. Comes back to the left side of the heart. Now this is known as the systemic loop, okay? This is what goes out to your body. So the left atrium receives that now oxygenated blood. It goes to the left ventricle to get pumped all the way out to your body. Drops everything off, and then it comes back. So that's our second loop, okay? So pulmonary loop right there, systemic loop right there, okay? This is very efficient, okay? Mammals in general have the most efficient circulatory system there is. The fact that these 2 loops are separate from each other really keeps any oxygenated blood from getting blended with deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood doesn't do us any good. It's already gotten rid of the oxygen. And so in some animals that only have 3 chambers, some of that blood is mixing, and it's just not as efficient of a system. It doesn't deliver the oxygen as well as this 2-loop system does, okay? I believe that is all for section 1. Yep. See you guys later.